For the love of God, where are the adults? Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am tackling the fifth and final installment of the Whispering Corridor series, 2009's A Blood Pledge. Now, I am going to say a few things before I start this review. First of all, this is a spoiler-free review. I will also be having a spoiler-filled deep dive discussion as an accompanying video to this one, but this review is spoiler-free and safe if you have not seen the movie. Second, and most important, there are elements of this movie and subsequently of this review that can be difficult and possibly triggering. And as a horror movie lover, I delight in the bloody and the macabre and so forth, but I want to take a moment to reel that back and talk seriously for just a minute and say that before I continue on with the subject matter of this review, if you or anybody you know is suffering from depression or otherwise going through a difficult time, and you're having violent, dangerous thoughts, please reach out to somebody. I'm going to go ahead and put up the National Suicide Prevention Hotline here. And all I can say is, please, there's no shame in calling. There's no shame in asking for help. We all need it every once in a while. And please just be safe. So, that being said, A Blood Pledge. So this movie, as I was saying, I mean, it deals with some serious subject matter. It deals with, well, suicide, basically. There is something that prevents me from going full out and saying that this movie glorifies suicide. I think it came close, but I don't think it reached that point. But what I will say is that the plot line of this movie follows four schoolgirls that make a blood pact, a blood pledge, to all commit suicide at the same time. And that happens one particular night. They sign a piece of paper, they cut their fingers, they put the blood on it, and it's a blood pledge. And all we know after that is that three of them survived, one of them died that night. We don't know why, we don't know how. All we know is who. And we go from there. The rest of the movie basically takes place with the other three interacting with each other and interacting with their schoolmates as scrutiny is caused or cast upon them. People are wondering what happened. A lot of people along with the audience are wondering what happened. And the story unfolds as to the events that happened of that night and all the events that led up to that night that caused that night to happen. And there's a lot of different dynamics of the characters that are interwoven between all this. People aren't who they appear to be. There's a lot of great mystery that unfolds here. And I've said that in the Whispering Corridor series, there's several things that tie them together. Nothing on a character or plot level. None of the characters or plots bleed into one another. This is not a linear one storyline taking place after another. This is simply having thematic tones carry on. And one of them is they all take place within an all-girls school, and they all have situations where we are presented with consequences, and then we are presented with the rest of the movie, which reveal the circumstances that caused those consequences to happen in the first place. And this movie is no different. The only real difference that I saw was we got just a little bit more of the story of the beginning part at the beginning. And as far as the big switcheroos and reveals and character dynamics go, there was an element of that in play. A lot of people weren't who they really appeared to be, but I don't think it went as far or as dramatic as some of the other entries. And if you watched yesterday's review of Voice, the fourth installment in the Whispering Corridor series, you heard that that was my favorite of the lot thus far. And what I will say is, though, I did not dislike this movie. I did find it enjoyable. I now stand firmly with number 4 as my favorite. This did not manage to overcome that. It did not manage to rise above. I think it's a solid entry. It belongs right with the other brethren of the Whispering Corridor series. I think it's a good movie. I just don't think it was as good as the fourth. And the mystery that unfolded and the character development and dynamics, I think, were well polished, just not nearly as good. Even though the one thing I said about number 4 is that although the mystery was great, the ending fell really flat and was terribly unsatisfying to me. That's one thing I will say about this movie, is that the ending I did feel was very satisfying. It was very satisfactory, and it really threatened to go elsewheres but ultimately I did like where it wound up, and I just think that the meat of the film, everything leading up to it, was just on a okay, not even okay. It was just on a very good level, but not exceptional, just pretty darn good. And I think that's ultimately where I landed with it, and I think the scores are going to reflect that, and I'm going to go ahead and toss them up right now. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And I think the scores for each and every category really kind of tell the story about the entirety of the movie as a whole, that I thought that they were well done. It was very good. It just, none of them wound up in a point of exceptional, and I typically kind of have it in my brain that exceptional is anything beyond, between 20 and 25. That's when we get into, epically good categories, and I really don't think that any level of this movie really reached that. But still enjoyable, still a good watch, still a decent movie. I think if I were to really nail down one thing that really bugged me about this film is, and I know it was kind of a necessary component as far as fleshing out the characters. I understand that. I just really feel like, okay, one more element of these movies that kind of tie in with all one another is, and I kind of touched on it a little bit in my opening stinger of Dear God, Where Are All the Adults? Is we experience through these characters throughout the entirety of the Whispering Corridor series, terrible tragedies that have unfolded. And rarely is any student afforded any level of sympathy or pity or time. That's the thing that gets me is, as far as, okay, I was in school. I remember being in school when I heard the news that a classmate of mine, somebody that I actually knew fairly well, passed away. He was riding his bike and he passed away. He basically got into a car accident, a car hit him, and he didn't make it. And it was very, very sad. And I remember that we had a crisis counselor come to the school, and he met with us as a group, and he met with a select few of us one-on-one. And I got plenty of time. I got a few days off of school. I got to talk with counselors. I got to talk with therapists. I got to talk with teachers. I got to talk with the crisis counselor. There was a lot of time involved and care involved. And I don't know if this is a cultural thing or if this was simply just the movies. And I would actually, if you went to school in South Korea, I would really love to get your insight on this. If you happen to be watching this and you have that insight, you have that knowledge, I would very much love for you to reach out to me and to have that discussion, because I am genuinely curious if those resources do exist. Because that's the one thing that they really didn't in any of these movies is that level of care, that level of that communication, that the empathy and the sympathy that the adults would naturally employ towards the students. It really seemed like the overarching theme of a lot of these storylines and a lot of these characters of succeed at any cost overcomes that. That any level of sympathy is like, well, you can't afford to not study. You can't afford to miss any class. Get your butt in there. Succeed at any cost. And one thing about this movie is that this takes it to a whole different level. This has a lot of elements of it, of this whole group of friends. By all rights, by all accounts, as we're following this movie, this group of 4 friends, 3 of them survived, 1 of them didn't. And the 3 that did survive are going through a hell of a time, potentially. By all accounts, anybody that knows this group knows that these 3 were tied to this 4th. And the fact that 1 of them passed and the 3 of them didn't, it follows a logical conclusion that the 3 of them are going to be broken up, that they're going to be, having a tough time. And they're never really afforded any sympathy, any time, any communication with any of their adults. And as far as their peers go, all they can do is have rumor mills started while they're whispering behind the 3's back and even in front of the 3. There's absolutely no level of sympathy or empathy given to the survivors in the peers or in the adults. And honestly, that was a tough pill for me to swallow. And again, I am very curious to see your input, if you're able to contribute any input on this, as to whether it's a cultural thing or it's just a fabrication of this movie. And I'm really, really hoping it's the latter, because damn, this one got really rough to watch as far as that goes. I just wanted to smack some schoolgirls up for some of the stuff that they were saying in front of these broken up kids that were just trying to get through the day and trying to figure out what in the hell happened. So that was a tough element of the movie for me. But like I said, I really didn't deduct any points from it. It is something that allowed the characters to kind of flesh out their stories and flesh out their development, and more power to it for that. It was just something that I think was a tough pill to swallow, and I wanted to discuss it because I was able to discuss it, and it kind of stuck with me as a point of this film without actually getting into spoiler territory. So that's pretty much it on the table there. So with a grand total of 70 out of 100 points, again, very good movie. Solid entry in the Whispering Corridor series, just not my favorite. And again, if any of the content contained within this movie or within this review or anything like this is triggering or difficult, or if you're having just a difficult time in general, please reach out to somebody. I'm going to go put the hotline back up here because I think it's really it's a fantastic resource. It's worth making the call. It's worth reaching out if you need to, and I implore you to do that. So I think that should about do it. That's my review of the last movie of the Whispering Corridor series, 2009's A Blood Pledge. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, which is Thanksgiving, and boy, do I have a treat for you. I think. We'll see. But I look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Thanksgiving. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.